can't seem to get enough. My mind is fixed on what it wants. I just let you beat me. Looks can be deceiving. Let you get the best of me. In bed with my worst enemy. This is a no-go. I just can't take hold. This is a danger zone. Back up and get me home. This is a no-go. I just can't take hold. This is a danger zone. Back up and get me. So put your hand in mine. Follow me. Let me waste your time. Set up me. Do some stupid shit. Take a seat. Let me waste your time. So put your
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Lawyer's Den on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Pellavito. I'll be one of your lawyers addressing a very important issue that we found out was an important issue by the Supreme Court of the United States. It's the court system. And Justice Roberts was on TV the other day going, you know, it looks like Americans don't even understand our Constitution or our court system. Part of it is something that David Walker has brought out. And everyone has seen his show on the Pod TV network, is that we are not required to have basic civics. So the thing is, without basic civics courses, without basic financial literacy courses, a lot of people don't even understand how the court system of the United States of America works. So today's program, we're going to be devoted on something, and also people, if you're not in the United States, of course, how would you know how our court system works? So we're looking at the court system. With that, we brought another attorney in, graduate from the University of Miami School of Law. We're going to bring in the Honorable Peter Bennett. And Peter, I certainly hope that you understand how the court system works, but this is kind of a revelation that most people in the United States have no clue, especially when lower courts, such as federal district courts, are making decisions which affect the entire United States. And a lot of people don't understand how the middle district court in Seattle, Washington can create a decision that affects people all over the country. So Peter, I'm going to leave it with you and give us some background on this.
Sure. It's interesting. You're right. I was unaware of that many people being not understanding the court system, but also there are clearly people who do understand the court system who are abusing it. And so that's happening a lot. And I think the Supreme Court's it's already started, but I think it's going to have to put an end to some of this anyway. So there are 1,000 roughly district judges. And this is the Constitution, basically, and our way of government I'm going to be talking about. So there are about 1,000 district judges, and most, the vast majority, are appointed. So maybe you did a favor for a politician, maybe you donated to a politician. I don't know. Maybe you're elected somewhere. But the point is that these people are not elected like our president, like our Congress people. So it's a really question of how the system was designed to work and who should be making decisions. So the founding fathers were really brilliant because they understood that human nature is flawed, and therefore governments can be flawed. As a footnote, you can look around the world and history and see just thousands of years of governments abusing people, and where they were supposed to be protecting people and they gave them too much power, and then they just took over and they evolved into something else, socialism or communism, whatever, where there's too many examples. So, but the point is the founding fathers said, okay, we're going to create checks and balances. So in that system, the legislative and executive branches, which are the elected politicians, officials, are the ones who are supposed to make the most decisions, the most important decisions in general. And the judicial system is supposed to be the enforcer of the rules. I kind of have an analogy, which may be obvious to some, of a basketball game or a soccer game, where the two sides are supposed to compete. They create the strategies, they create the plays, and then the umpire or the referee decides, okay, that's a foul, or you're breaking the rules and you have to follow the rules. So in the end, you want an elected official to be making these decisions, especially when you're talking about issues of national policy, where a single judge has very limited resources to make these decisions. They don't have gigantic staffs. They don't have, the intelligence agencies to give them background information. So really, the court should be in the background. They should be the enforcer of the rules. They should be the referee, and they should be calling the fouls. But they need to let the legislature and the president, battle it out when they do, and eventually and develop their strategy.
Yeah, and the thing is, when you're looking at this, and this is actually going to go in front of the Supreme Court pretty soon, is that the district judges that are making decisions that affect the entire United States allows for what they call forum shopping. There are about 700 district judges. So if you have a case and you need a conservative judge, you go to Texas. If you have a case, you need a liberal judge, you go to Washington.
Exactly.
And then what happens?
The judge you want.
Yeah, and then it has to percolate up the system to the appellate courts, and then from the appellate courts all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. And all this, unfortunately, takes a lot of time. And then ultimately, it's the Supreme Court of the United States that makes the decision that's binding on all people and all parties. But another important part of the U.S. court system is jurisdiction, whether or not you have jurisdiction. In other words, do you have jurisdiction over the particular issue that you're listening to? Do you have jurisdiction over the land that you're hearing, if it's real estate?
And so what is jurisdiction is basically the power, the correct power to make the ruling in the first place, to get involved in the case.
Right. Yeah, because there's some courts, they call them Article 1 and Article 3 courts. Some of the specialty courts, like the U.S. Tax Court, only has jurisdiction over tax-related issues, and they do not have jurisdiction over other issues. So if you had a civil case or criminal case, they would not be able to hear it. But to make everything even more complicated, we also have state courts. And so the thing is, your case may not be heard in front of a federal court because federal courts don't have jurisdiction, especially a lot of criminal actions. They're heard by the state court because there's very few federal crimes. Most of the crimes are at the state level. So in addition to the federal system, we also have the state system and the state judges, making the law even more complicated in the United States, because not only do you have a federal system, you also have the state system. And I was doing some work today where there was a possible conflict between the states, and that happens quite often. And sometimes there's conflicts of laws between the state and federal, and you have to move up the food chain to get these things resolved. So for the people listening, especially outside the United States, the court system in the United States is quite complicated. And I'm talking about especially countries that are much smaller than ours, and most countries are. Because besides India and China, the United States is the third largest in terms of population. Most of other states, Spain, France, Italy, they're not near as big. Norway has a population of 4 million people? It's about one of our tiny little states. So they don't have the huge infrastructure court system that we do in the United States. So are we going to see these changes, though? Because the Supreme Court, it looks like they're going to take this up, because Roberts is having a real problem with the fact that you can have a federal court, district court, issue a temporary restraining order that affects not only the people in front of him, but also people in Nebraska, if you're in Florida. Or do you think they're going to pick this particular issue up and limit the jurisdiction of the federal judges only to the case in front of them?
I think they have to do that, and they should, because first of all, you've made several good points. One, forum shopping. You can go pick your judge. So if you want a liberal judge, you go to a liberal judge. There's hundreds and hundreds of judges to pick from. So, and you know their records generally. So the point is that one judge right now could rule on an issue that they could put an injunction out, and they do, that could freeze the administration on a major issue. So, and that's just one judge's opinion in one little area, so forum shopping is why they need to restrict this. And there shouldn't be jurisdiction in cases where their parties aren't before them anyway. And also, you made a really interesting point about it takes a lot of time. Our judicial system is already jammed. Why is it jammed? One, because it's handling all the criminal cases in the United States, all the civil cases in the United States. You can wait years to have a civil case heard, and criminal cases go on and on and on forever. And one reason for that, as a footnote, is we have more lawyers in the United States per capita than any other country in the world. So everybody, you have all these lawyers suing each other, and that's causing a tremendous amount of burden for the civil courts. So the whole system is not designed to handle all these issues. And the Supreme Court only has a small amount of justices. They don't have an army to decide all these cases that are coming up to them from the district courts and from the federal courts, and all these appeals and all these, attacks on the administration particularly. But anytime they don't have the staff, they can't do this. They have to concentrate on the major issues because they're only can handle so many cases in each term. So they have to restrict this. They have to restrict it for their own workflow. They have to restrict it for the Constitution. And hopefully they'll restrict it in multiple ways, including saying you can only rule. I think the two clear ones, to me, it's 100% clear. One, you can only rule about the parties before you. One party cannot bring a suit to affect the whole nation. And two, which is sort of the same thing, is not only just about the parties themselves, but also that no judge should be able to put a national injunction or, make a ruling that affects the entire United States in general, I'd say. You can't say never, because again, they have to enforce the rules, but there has to be restrictions. And I believe the Supreme Court will have to do it for workflow alone.
Yeah, a couple of their notes about our judicial system, because you were talked earlier about elected versus appointed judges. Most of the federal judges are actually appointed, including the Supreme Court of the United States. They are not elected. But at the state level, most of them are actually elected.
Oh, sorry about that. I knew a lot of judges were appointed and others were elected.
And
still some are not.
Yeah, and some are not. And so the thing is, like at the U.S. Tax Court, I used to clerk for a judge, Bob Leary, who got reappointed because they have terms, and that's a federal appointed position. The term in the U.S. Tax Court is 15 years. However, not all courts are like that. The Supreme Court is actually appointed for life. So if you get a Supreme Court position, you have it for life. But a lot of the judges are not. They're appointed for a term of years, and so they may or may not be in the system. But it is I agree with you. It is one of the biggest and most complex legal systems in the world. Part of it deals with our democracy, and part of it deals with the fact we have state system running along with the federal system, which makes it even more complicated.
That's true. You're right. Not every country would have both systems, interacting with each other. Sometimes conflicting with each other.
Yeah, they're too small, so they don't need it. So when you're in the United States, you're dealing with a very complex legal system. And as I tell people, it's complex and built to stay that way. And we're talking about a jam in court. When I had one case in Palm Beach County, and this was during COVID-19. They said, we'll have to get to it. I said, well, when are we going to have our hearing? And they said, we're backed up over 100,000 cases in Palm Beach.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well,
that's what I said. That's like 100,000 cases.
I was talking about that. When I was a child, I was actually run over. My hand was run over by a car. And they finally settled the case about 11 years later, and it wasn't a lot of money either, but it took 11 years for it to go through the court system, and this was back decades ago. So, right. I mean, the point is you can't jam everything up, and the bottom line is the Supreme Court can only handle so many cases. If hundreds of cases are constantly coming up there, there are over 100 cases right now where there are challenges to the Trump administration's or actions. And I'm not even saying whether I agree or not, although many of them are fine in my opinion, and some of them maybe are over the edge of the rules. But the point is, how many, if this continues, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican president and Congress, how can the Supreme Court handle this? You're going to need 1,000 Supreme Courts or 100 Supreme Courts. They can't do it. They need to do it in practice and in following the Constitution in the end. Let the courts call the fouls when they're clearly made and affect national issues. Let the local issues be handled by the local courts.
Yeah. I think what you're going to do is
we have to go, Nick, because Wall Street Hackers is on next, and we're running out of time.
I was going to say that you're going to see some changes by the U.S. Supreme Court, but I think what we do need is some basic fundamental education on the court system in the United States. If you live here in the United States, you should take a class in that. If you can get one, because they just don't.
We need a better educational system, period. And that's
we need a better educational system. If you're outside the United States, the same thing. So it's it's a big challenge. It's very, very difficult.
System.
So
anyway, we'll be right on back with Wall Street Hackers.
We're going to Wall Street Hackers, but we'll see you next week on Lawyer's Den. Take care.
See you around 6 then.
I can feel my body hold against the concrete, but I can't seem to get enough. My mind is fixed on what it wants. I just let you beat me, look at me deceiving. Let you get the best of me, in bed with my worst enemy. This is a no-go, I just can't take hold. This is a danger zone, back up and get me home. This is a no-go, I just can't take hold. This is a danger zone, back up and get me. So put your hand in mine, follow me, let me waste your time. Set up feet, do some stupid shit. Take a seat, let me waste your time.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wall Street Hackers on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Palavito. I'll be your moderator for today's show. And today's show, we're going to feature our hacker himself, who's a graduate of UCLA with a degree in economics, a law degree at the University of Miami, and a master's in business administration from NYU. Spending 17 years on Wall Street, he studied the market pretty thoroughly, so he kind of knows what's going on. And with that, we're going to bring in the hacker himself. You've seen him on the Pod TV network before. His name is Peter Bennett. So, Peter, you're going to keep us up to date with a fast-moving market in the United States of America.
Oh, yeah, fast is an understatement for the last few weeks. I mean, it was way down, way up. So, welcome to Wall Street Hackers, May 13th, 2025. You can catch a new episode of Wall Street Hackers following Lawyer's Den. Lawyer's Den goes on around 6 Eastern Standard Time on Tuesdays, and then Wall Street Hackers come on roughly 6:15, depending on how long we go on Lawyer's Den. Two, I believe, the most intelligent shows you could be watching. Anyway, the markets. So investors are now facing several short-term and long-term issues and challenges. The market, first of all, challenge number one is that the market is near an all-time high valuations, and it has been for months and months. So even before the current issues on tariffs, the market was really high. Now, a perfect reflection of this is that Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan both said that they expected returns for the stock market to be about 3 to 6% for the next 10 years. That is very low compared to what investors are used to. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge is the obvious one that's all over the news. I don't have to tell you everything about that. And that is about the tariffs. So the things President Trump is doing are not only really well thought out, but are also necessary because of our deficits and also because other countries have been taking advantage of us for decades. And it's not like this is news. I mean, politicians on both sides of the aisle for decades have said, oh, this is unfair, this is unfair. And it got worse and worse since the passing of NAFTA. So there needs to be a reset on, and it's happening, and it started happening this week, and that caused a lot of volatility. But the point is that this is going to create disruption in the short run, but will benefit in the long run in the United States. But that's the volatility you've seen in the last few weeks. But interestingly, as a footnote right now, the S&P 500 is 3% above the rate the market was at on Liberation Day. So since the tariff announcement, and as a footnote, I think the market, I expect this, the market's a little over optimistic because the tariffs won't be as bad as they think in terms of the size, but they are going to cost companies money. And companies are going to be forced to make a decision. Do I pay the taxes or do I spend money to bring manufacturing home to the United States? Many will bring manufacturing back to the United States. That's going to cost a lot. So that'll be a short to medium term hit for many of the companies in the market. The third challenge is that basically for many decades, since at least the 70s, the presidents and Congress have been kicking the can down the road on gigantic debt. It's not new. They've been talking about it for 50 years. So we need to fix the system. So they've been making little tweak. And right now it came up national debt is 36 trillion, but that was my next point. That is the number. And now that's the correct number. So everybody all day long, you can see, oh, it's 36 trillion, and that is so much debt. Just that the interest on what they're showing is more already than the national defense budget. But here's the problem. The real obligations of the United States are probably about 125 trillion because any household, any business uses generally accepted accounting principles, which is called GAAP. And anybody would be showing the fact that they owe all these unfunded liabilities for Social Security and Medicare. Basically, the trust funds are running out in roughly 10 years. And beyond that, those are promises made, and the money was supposed to be put aside. It's hard for politicians, admittedly, during the last 50 years to tell people, we're spending too much, we promised you too much. But they're going to need adjustments, and a lot of them. So if you're worried about 36 trillion, you have to worry about 125 trillion, which, by the way, is roughly the amount of the entire U.S. stock market, the entire U.S. bond market, and all U.S. privately held and commercial real estate in America. Basically, if you took everything and sold it all in America, you could maybe pay off this debt, give or take, depending on if it's higher or lower than 125. Maybe it's even more. So that's a really big challenge because they're going to have to deal with this. And finally, challenge number 4 is that the world is in similar situations. So even if the U.S. had fully funded Social Security and Medicare, the rest of the world is offered health insurance, health care that's mostly free. One country at least totally free, but they're offering large amounts of free health care. And they're for aging populations, and they haven't put aside the money for that either. And their retirement systems are equally roughly underfunded with the United States. So it's easy to pay, to just kick the can down the road until the road ends, as the Speaker of the House referred to earlier in the year, that the road is going to end. So these are big challenges for investors, but I'm not to say the glass is half full. There are still opportunities out there. You have to be really selective, more important than ever in your investments. So I believe you need to be both defensive. I love looking for income because income investments have generally outperformed. And maybe next week I will actually get into those studies of over 100 years of studies that show that dividend stocks outperform the rest of the market substantially. But you need the right ones. You need defensive sectors. You need good balance sheets, and basically, you need to be careful. So, 2 quotes of the week. If we get that Ken Howell off, it's blocking me now. I don't know. Oh, thank you. 2 quotes of the week relating to trade. One, this is from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. He warned critics of President Trump's controversial tariff plans to, quote, never bet against America. He also said, quote, throw whatever you will at our capital markets, the Great Depression, 2 world wars, 9/11, a global recession, the COVID pandemic, or the last few years of sky-high inflation. Each time the American economy gets knocked down, it gets back up again, and it gets back up even stronger than it was before. So that will be part of the discussion we'll have at the end with Nick, where we look at the question of why foreigners are selling U.S. treasuries. But the second quote is from Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. U.S. tariffs won't dip below 10% for, quote, the foreseeable future. So this is how I see it playing out. I think we're going to see 10% plus tariffs, depending on how much other countries are willing to negotiate, and higher tariffs on some countries, and things will adjust. And on the other side, people may pay more in the United States for some things, but the economy will adjust, and I think the consumers will be helped by very likely energy prices coming down, or at least the effort to bring them down, as well as deregulation. So there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of parts in this motor, or gears in the motor. Most interesting story of the week: Trump to sign executive order he will slash drug prices by up to 80%. For many years, the world has, and this is mostly his quote, for many years, the world has wondered why prescription drug and pharmaceuticals in the United States of America were so much higher than they were in other nations, paraphrase quote. Sometimes being 5 to 10 times more expensive than the same drug manufactured in the exact same laboratory. The pharmaceutical drug companies would say for years that it was research and development costs. Several points. One, why should the U.S. consumer be the one to pay for a lot of the rest of the world's R&D? Admittedly, some countries can't afford it, but there are other countries who should be paying more. And from an investment standpoint, this is an example of exactly why I stay away from the healthcare sector, which got hit today, but I think the market's underestimating how they're going to get hit. Because I believe that President Trump might do, my good guess, or an estimated guess is he'll say we get the lowest prices of any country. So they're going to have to either raise their prices in other countries, which won't be a good move for them in some ways because of supply and demand, and maybe the other countries will start copying our drugs, but or they're going to have to lower the United States drugs. So it's actually hard in a way to say, but this isn't how they operate, so it is disruptive. And the other thing is, Tim and Nick, you're on. I don't know if you know that or not. And the other thing is, there's going to be even more pressure on the U.S. drug pharmaceutical system. And I expect this for a long time, because there's such a problem with Medicare that the government's going to have to look to cut costs for consumers and for the government itself. And that's a place to look for money. And the problem would be indirect in that they'll probably do less than R&D down the road. But that's the price, because you've got a system that's, floating with deficits. Next section.
So, Peter, you're actually getting some fan mail. They actually texted me last week. I asked them to text their question this week to you because
okay, Kim, we're on the show though, right?
Yeah, but these are live, and this is what is great about this interaction and gaining more people watching
Okay.
is to hear them out. But like because your attorneys, they had a question about are they being taxed without representation? They bought a battery at auto parts and they charged him for two items, one for the battery itself and approximately $200, and the second item a
Kim,
battery.
let's get to that question after
Okay.
the
So
show.
but here's the thing it is that they charged him $22, which was charged to the balance until you return an old battery. Once the old battery is returned, the auto parts anyway. But his question goes even longer than that. It was too long for the set here, but the question boils down to he returned the battery because it wasn't right, and they gave him a refund, but they didn't refund the taxes. Is
Kim,
that?
we're talking about international politics right now.
I know, but this is a fan who.
Kim, I'll have to address that afterwards. If you could let me continue, I'd appreciate
Okay.
it. Oh, thank you.
There are some comments too about some of the international and federal stuff that you're talking about, but
Okay, great.
that does kind of boil down to an international federal thing. Is what if people are not refunding the taxes? What happens to the money? I mean, I thought that was pretty interesting question, but anyway.
Well, that's a complicated question. We could get into it. They do that with VAT taxes now, but that's. Again, a different question.
But when someone returns something for a refund,
Tim,
they get their
I cannot
tax
believe
back?
you're interrupting the show like this. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is really embarrassing.
I know, but I just wanted to make sure we say hi to Ken and thank him for texting in a question to you. I thought
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay,
come on, Peter.
why President Trump, this is unbelievable. Why President Trump should give me a call. For the last 5 weeks, I've been saying that President Trump needs to put more pressure on Russia to end the Ukraine war. I suggested weeks and weeks ago, a month ago, that he said he needs to put pressure on Putin because I think Putin's not really the one who's cooperating, although Zelensky's had his issues too. So President Trump should say, look, we're going to put increase our military aid to Ukraine 15% every 2 months until you decide that peace is essential. And that would put a lot of pressure on him very soon. It wouldn't last long. But this week, I'm going to talk briefly about Congress and the IRS, and basically saying there's been moves to defund the IRS because of its past political corruption. It was very corrupt. It was attacking Republicans, and whether it's not the job of the IRS to get involved in that kind of thing. But the point is you need to supervise it much better. It'd be easy to do by creating an agency over it, which would have transparency to Congress and the president. But the point is the IRS is necessary to keep the system fair, to catch cheaters, and also to collect money that's desperately needed by the government to pay off the deficits. Okay, dividend pick of the week. First, disclaimers. This is for entertainment only. Wall Street Hackers is only our opinion. There are no guarantees on any of our suggestions. Consult your financial advisor. So this week, I'm going to get off of our favorites, which I've talked about for the last few weeks, which is long-term high coupon treasuries. I look for the high coupons because that way, if inflation goes up, you can reinvest at higher rates, especially in an IRA or a Roth IRA or 401k. And also MPLX. And they're both yielding, long-term treasuries are about 5% today, which is unbelievable. And you would have killed for that a few years ago. So this week, a very small allocation, under 1%. And that's mainly because right now, treasuries look very safe and there's no need to take a lot of risk. But EIFZF is Exchange Income Corporation, where we will have a small allocation. Exchange Income is, again, EIFZF. It's a Canadian company. They do aviation and manufacturing. Basically, they do a lot of essential flights in northern Canada. So, and they also do precision parts and some window production. So this is a pretty safe business, not guaranteed because they're in the airline business, but they What I like about it is it has a 5% yield. Again, you want to ideally hold it in an IRA or a 401k because there's a 15% tax from Canada on U.S. investors. If you're Canadian, then you don't have to worry about that. According to E-Trade, it has a 8 price over cash flow. It's a very important measure. That's a 12% cash flow yield. It's generating a lot of cash, and it has growth. It has debt to assets, a reasonable 50%, and its sales growth was 6%, which is greater than 75% of airlines. So, as a diversifier, for its potential growth and riding out a 5% dividend yield, does not look bad at all. So, panel question of the week. We'll bring Nick on, maybe Kim too, and Kim. Okay. So the question is, does it make sense that foreigners and foreign governments have been likely selling U.S. Treasury bonds and notes? Quick background. Yields on long-term treasuries are about 5% today, which is even more shocking than the 4.7 and 4.8 that I was shocked by. A couple of years ago, just 2 or 3 years ago, you were getting like 2.5. If you look back, it's like, and people would have flipped out. They would have been ecstatic to get a 3.5 or a 4% on such a safe investor. My strong suspicion is that many investors overseas and also in many foreign governments have been selling treasuries because they fear, 1, a weak U.S. dollar because of the tariffs, 2, a weak dollar because of the trade wars, and 3, inflation in the United States. Some also may be moving into gold, where we have a very small allocation as a diversifier. Again, we've talked about that, but maybe 2 or 3% just in case the dollar, there's massive inflation, which I don't think there will be, but it's good to hedge. So today and this week, we've been seeing a reversal when some good news came out, the British deal and possible negotiations with China, which seem to be progressing. So all of a sudden, the quote, "Buy America" trade is back. So the question, are foreigners and foreign investors making a mistake by selling U.S. treasuries, or does it make sense given this economic climate? Nick and Kim?
Well, the question is how much they already own already, as well as how much of the debt that they already own in the United States, which is a conversation that I have had several times with David, because it's kind of concerned me. What happens when they decide that, okay, we're just going to dump all of this? Is it good for us? I think that, it generates money. I think anytime you can generate money, that's good for us. I believe that the taxes or the tariffs
it generates money? They're selling
I believe that it will generate some kind of revenue somewhere, but I think right now we have no revenue generating at all. The tariffs have shot the economy and we're sitting at a dead still. And this is something that I liked about Reagan was he was more about what is it going to take to get circulation of revenue. So, but I don't know. I think it's all a guessing game as to what will improve our situation and what doesn't. Is it a good thing? I don't think right now we should be selling anything to foreigners right now.
Nick, what do you think?
Well, actually, most of the federal debt is not owned by foreign governments. It's actually owned by the Social Security Trust Fund and by the U.S. government. But there are some foreign governments that do have a lot of U.S. Treasury debt. One is Japan, which is like number 1, then China, number 2. So the real problem, though, Peter, I think you point out quite correctly, is this factor. It's not the debt; it's the interest on the debt. Okay, when you're piling up so much debt that your interest is almost $1 trillion, this gives very little amount of money that can be used discretionarily to fund anything in the U.S. because you're spending most of your income taxes is going to pay interest on a debt. I don't believe the American public realizes how sick Washington, D.C. is. They're sick because they're flooded with money, which makes it corrupt. Thank you, Citizens United. But it's even more sick because their financial statements are upside down. And if it doesn't get better, and I know I saw your quote there, don't bet against the American government, but I guarantee you the people in Rome said don't bet against Rome. People in Britain said, don't bet against Britain. I'm positive Germany said, don't bet against Germany. But it doesn't matter. When your financial situation is this far up and down, you really do need to take a look at it. Or I hope, Peter, you enjoy Chinese dinner tonight and next night.
Well, that's true. So a few points. One, you're right. The debt is out of control, but it has been. But and it needs to be addressed, and I think it's starting to be addressed. But there are questions. But so here's my theory of why I think the sellers of the treasuries are making a mistake, probably, although interest rates could keep going higher. But I have about 4 reasons why. First of all, other countries are in the same situation as the United States. I've looked at countries around Europe and South America and Asia. I've looked at their balance sheets on their retirement funds, on how much they put away for their medical needs, for aging demographics. It's not pretty. The United States at least has more wealth overall to deal with some of these issues, and they are going to be difficult issues in the next years. Number 2, I don't think the Treasury is going to let the rates go much higher than 5%. I could be wrong, but my theory is the Treasury will start buying bonds at around this rate, because they can just buy the bonds back themselves or not issue as many bonds. So they're not going to want rates to go up any higher than they are, because mortgage rates are already so high, and rates of so many things are tied to it. Credit cards rates are affected. So the U.S. government will just buy back the money. We do it so much anyway. We buy back mortgages. We buy back, securities. That's been going on for a long time. And I think that's a cap. So it's almost like a one-way trade potentially, where they'll let it go down, but they won't go up. Plus, inflation numbers came in really reasonable today, very low actually. I think it was 2.2 or 2.3% compared to even below expectations. So it's going the right way. So the Fed will probably be easing up in the short run. The U.S. government and the world needs low rates, and that's the bottom line, because they cannot pay interest on the high rates at the high rates, because you can't pay interest on that much debt. So one of the first ways they're going to solve this is to use yield curve control. It's going to happen almost 100% around the world. Rates are going to be down to zero in the next 5 to 7 years, maybe, if not, and heading down probably in the meantime. So it seems like a good bet. It's a safe bet. I wouldn't put everything into treasuries, but I think that it's a decent bet for a safe part of a portfolio, especially inside an IRA or a 401k. And I don't like that many other investments right now. I mean, if rates keep going up, the market's going to get really killed, and treasuries will be safer than them if you hold them onto them. So I like them. I think the foreigners are making a mistake, and we'll see. But we're running out of time. And
right now, what would be a good investment for, say, a middle class type person who's looking for some way to secure his nest egg a little bit, or her nest egg right now?
How about treasuries? Kim.
Just
treasuries.
Okay,
we're going to end the show. Thanks for watching Wall Street Hackers. As Kim always says, get healthy, get wealthy. We'll see you soon. See you next week on Tuesday. Bye-bye.